Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online Alternative Gale Online Season 2 review. This one's going to be for episodes 7 and 8, so last week's episode and this week's episode. So with this episode, this squad jam comes to an end. So over the course of these two action-packed episodes, we do get the winner, and I thought these were really good episodes. They were obviously super action focused, as we had mostly got most of the extra stories out of the way, and it's just here is the fight to the finish with the main players involved. There's still some twists and turns, which I thought was quite impressive, and overall just the sort of spectacle of the final fight on the sinking ship, how they kind of turned the tables and kind of built up to the big fight we were pretty much all expecting to get, given what they had done like last episode basically. Really strong stuff here. So let's go through this here. Episode 7, of course. So we immediately resolved the cliffhanger, which was that M was being choked out by one of the kind of gymnastics club members. We just start off and he just breaks free. He just kind of throws her to the ground. He gets out of that. She basically gets taken out quite quickly, so that's another team gone. And then really quickly, like the immediate next scene is that Pito Hui takes out the rest of the Memento Mori team by using the ship's AI Clara to activate the sprinklers and do some electrical stuff to just completely fry them. So they're taken out like immediately. But this is also the episode where we set up this plot point that to a certain degree you can say, did they do enough with this? But I think they got the general idea across, which is that Pito Hui is like mentally drained from having performed a concert basically the day before the tournament here, and you can tell she is struggling, and they get across this with the idea that because she uses the nerve gear, that's the only reason she hasn't been sort of like booted out of the game for safety. So she's just sort of a bit like pushing herself to her limits because she wants to eventually, of course, as we get to at the end of the episode, have the fight with Len. So I thought it was just an interesting plot point, but they also played it into this episode with like the scene in a minute or two's time where she plays dead once or twice. So some clever stuff there also. So I actually called this the next thing that happens in one of my previous videos, which is that the armored team that won the last squad jam out of absolutely nowhere, the guys who are stranded up on top of the building in the corner of the map that the ship is now heading towards, as I predicted, they do get killed by Pito Hui purposefully crashing the ship into the building. Now the way they do this is literally just that the ship basically just plows straight through the building, so they get killed kind of instantaneously, despite the betrayer member, Elvin I think his name is, thinking that they were going to save them, but no, they get taken out. He then goes to find Pito Hui and finds her unconscious on the ground, and this is when he gets stabbed through the head with her photon saber. Literally a second after, I think it's David, the Memento Mori team member, kind of calls him and says, stay away from her, because they've sort of figured out that, oh, she's planning to betray the betrayer team, of course. So already there's a little bit of a setup here for like, oh, you would basically say up to now that Pito Hui has been playing this as if I'm just on the betrayer team, I'm going to try and win for this team. But here's the first sign of like, oh no, like something a little bit different is happening here. So that's quite interesting. This then sets up Pito Hui versus David, and we get basically a lightsaber fight. It's a photon saber fight. She, at the start of this, is that he obviously has to get to her. And when he arrives, he just finds Elvin's body. But he then nearly gets killed in sort of the same way, because it's revealed that Pito Hui was playing kind of dead as Elvin, and she nearly gets the advantage there. He's too quick for this, and so they have their duel. But they set up this dynamic where both of their sabers are low on power, and that each clash is going to doubly kind of drain the battery. And so we get this quite even fight here ultimately, because he wants revenge for the previous squad jump where he was killed by the saber. This is why he has one himself. Eventually their sabers basically run out of power. They both sort of run in, discard their now empty sabers, but this is where Pita Hui reveals that actually she has 2 more sabers and they're fully charged, and so she just chops him to pieces completely, and it's another win for her against him. So very fun sequence. It makes sense for her because she is a celebrity, that she can effectively afford to have lots of replacements of these kind of really expensive pieces of equipment, because I think we know the photon sabers are very, very expensive. So after that, we basically just cut to she destroys the ship AI, so no one can kind of change what she plans to do, and then she confronts basically Len and the rest of the team. This is where we get the big shock reveal for episode 7, which I thought was really well done, because they used the fact that, like, oh yeah, if you look back in the episode, like in terms of how they went about showing you the reveals, they did the betrayer reveal with, I think it was the boss to the rest of her team, Eva, but they didn't actually show kind of Pita Hui revealing that she is the betrayer. She just, the second she heard that, basically it was like, it's me, and the idea seems to be that the rest of them kind of just went along with it. And then the fact that she was able to use the kind of flying thing to go with the team just kind of highlights that I guess there weren't a lot of super specific rules about this, where it's just assumed that the right person would get on, but that was never really part of it. I guess it was just highlighting the tournament organizers kind of wanting to just have an element of betrayal kind of in place, and assuming some people will play by the rules, but hey, what if someone else just goes? Then we get some betrayer within the betrayer style dynamics, and are they going to be loyal to their original team or to the new team? And that's kind of exactly what happens here. They maybe could have explained it in a way that was a little bit better when it comes to like did Len just never look to check because Pita Hui just said it immediately, and so this was a shock to her? Or was Len aware of this the entire time? There was some slight stuff there where I was kind of like, can we go back to that a little bit? It was sort of the same with the presentation of like what happened with Pita Hui and the sabers. Like, I think context roughly gets you across the idea that, yeah, she just happened to have 2 more sabers, but the way they visually showed it was not like they didn't reveal it as clearly as they could have, ultimately. So yeah, what happens here is that in the corridor, she walks past them to kind of join up with the fact that she's actually on the original team, and it's Len who is the betrayer character. But she then at least lies initially to kind of say that, hey, I took out the rest of the betrayer team, now we can actually sort this out between us because we're still on opposing teams. We can now fight to the end. This makes Len really angry because she wanted to have her big fight with Eva, the boss, and at this point she thinks Pita Hui has just kind of taken out the boss, even though Pita Hui knows that Len really wants to have this fight. And Len kind of loses it here. They play it up in a kind of comedy way, in that Len losing it it's never the same quite as sort of like Pita Hui's kind of craziness, but you can tell for the character that Len is, she is quite angry and annoyed about this, and is saying stuff like, I want to kill you in the kind of worst way possible, basically. And she's just happy about this because this is what she wanted all along, was to have an out-and-out fight against Len once again. The episode 7 ends with the boss arriving to get Len out of this situation, because of course, hey, they didn't actually address that, yeah, Pita Hui had not taken her out, and Len is actually teammates with her, so they won't get to have their fight in this squad jam, but they get to team up together, which is kind of equally as fun. So going into episode 8, what they do is they tell M at the start to basically sit out the battle so they can turn this into a 2v2. That because kind of the situation with M when it comes to like Pito Hui is sort of, and Len, is that he is a kind of supporter for both of them. If Pito Hui tells him to do something, he will do it. And in this case, it's like, yeah, she just says, you sit out the fight. You will basically just be there to sort of prop up the winner at the end, which it has obviously a double meaning here in that, like, you're not trying to win yourself, you're just meant to help whoever wins, and he literally does that at the end of it. So yeah, the situation here is that it's Pito Hui and Fuka against Len and Eva the boss, basically. So very fun 2v2 fight that we get here on mostly the kind of main deck of the ship, but they also use some of the kind of like upper sections as well. Because obviously the ship is kind of struggling at this point. It hasn't quite got super bad, but it will in a second. So there's some cool stuff there. As they get into the sort of setup for the fight, because both groups are separated at this point, Pito explains to Fuka that there are only two people in the game, basically in VR gaming, who she believes is like more skilled than her and has more willpower than her, that she is quote unquote like afraid of, that someone like her is surprised by, basically. So we get this very fun little backstory moment where she talks about the SAO beta and how she actually met Kirito there, and they fought over like a boss drop. And he, quote unquote, bested her, but didn't like defeat her, and left basically saying that, hey, for someone who's 2 levels lower than me, you're doing really good. And he left. And she notes that, like, okay, he kind of came across as a bit of a poser, but I thought he was amazing, basically. And she can obviously see all the stuff that she sees in Len, in kind of Kirito as well, which I thought was just kind of fun. And it's just like, there's a really cool reference to the main story of SAO. So fun stuff there. And then, yeah, we address what is the situation here, because of course Fuka opened up this conversation by saying, like, you're scared of Len, aren't you? And she says, yeah. And part of it is because of, I suppose, the way which she fought against her in the fight during Squad Jam, that the fact that she was ultimately kind of like defeated by Len attacking her and like biting her throat out in VR, that she didn't kind of expect that, because I think it's the idea of Pito Hui is this kind of openly crazy character who openly does weird things, whereas Len most of the time is kind of quiet, kind of like mostly kind of quiet, composed, and kind of normal. But then when she gets really into things, she does kind of insane stuff just very casually, and that's the sort of almost like scary part of Len, which is kind of funny to think about. But she is eager to fight her, and so we get the idea of the plan from Len and Eva is they're going to use these grenades. Len uses her speed, sets them off. This cracks the ship in half, and it's part of Len's overall plan is that, okay, the ship is now going to begin to kind of like rise up, and then it will sink kind of vertically. And she is aware of that and thinking about that the entire time, whereas Pito Hui is aware it's happening but isn't focused on it so much, and so that creates the situation kind of at the end of the episode. But first of all, of course, we have to get rid of the other two team members here. So how do we deal with Fuka and Eva? We do have Len versus Fuka temporarily, which is kind of fun. I really liked Len just challenging Fuka and just being like, hey, fight me, you coward. And Fuka goes ahead with it. Of course, Len is better, though she does have to be cautious about how destructive Fuka's weapons are. But the main thing here is that Len blows off Fuka's helmet, is the kind of main thing ultimately. On the ground, it seems like she's quote-unquote dead. She nearly gets Len with a kind of point-blank grenade, but Len gets to do a very cool kind of speed feat here where she just kicks the grenade launcher shell, and just sends it away. Fuka is actually killed by Eva when she faces Eva. She fires a grenade launcher shell up there. Eva's nearly killed, but she dives out of the kind of balcony effectively. And it seems like Fuka's like, oh, well, I guess I've won. She's just going to hit the ground and die from fall damage. But Eva purposefully fell head first so she could do like an upside down accurate shot. And so she kills Fuka with a headshot and dies from the fall damage. Really cool visual as this all happened here, because it's getting very chaotic, because while this is happening, Pito Hui has come back over to face Len, and this is where we get that whole situation here. So this is the point at which, yeah, it's fully pretty much upright at this point. Pito's hanging on the rail. And yeah, this is sort of the point that Pito has about Len, is that there's no hesitation here. Like, this is the interesting part of Len in these situations. There's no, you're my friend, I shouldn't do this. It's just like, no, you're vulnerable, hanging there. Pull the trigger. And then kind of continuously shoot at her as she's down there. Now, Pito Hui manages to kind of counter this. She survives by holding the knife into the deck, and she fires back up, and this is what takes out her submachine gun and forces it into a kind of melee fight here. So very cool, as you know, the ship is sinking downwards like this. They climb up basically onto the top, and this is where it all sort of like goes down here. So there's a few interesting sequences here. The main one here is the idea of, what is Len going to do? She has a knife against 2 photon swords. So she talks to her knife and calls it Na-chan and throws it. Pito kind of annihilates it with her saber. But she uses this like, oh, I've got you kind of dead to rights, as when you're dealing the final blow, you're at your most vulnerable type situation. She quick dodges, takes out a second knife, which she got from Eva, and cuts off one of Pito Hui's arms, stabs her, and it's meant to be the replay of their final fight, where it got really up close. They're kind of grappling with each other. This time, Pito Hui is prepared for the bite, so she's dodging that, but leaves the opening for the straight up headbutt, basically. I'm going to use my head to do this, and she literally does that. It is incredibly violent, only kind of offset by the fact that it is in VR, and of course the kind of pain receptor things aren't really in play. But still, just the visual of all of this happening is kind of brutal, because they still get across the idea for kind of Pito Hui, I guess partially because she is mentally drained, that this up close beating takes its toll on her, and she, even though she has a little bit of health left after this, she is effectively out of the fight at this point. And the final part of this is basically just the idea of, oh, are you, after all of this, are you really going to let me die by drowning in this? Are you just like going to let the rising water kind of finish me off? And it's like, no. Len crawls over to her for the whole purpose of pushing her off the side of the ship into the ship's still spinning propellers. And this is the kind of very violent death of Pito Hui. But it's still not over, because as the ship fully sinks, Len's now in the water. Wait, why hasn't it ended? M pops up out of nowhere, and he basically holds her up. He drowns, so he's the last player to die on the enemy team. Len wins, and yeah, it is technically a win for Team Betrayer, but Len wins. Also, the boss wins, and a lot of the other characters actually do win. So that's kind of an interesting one. Like they won the first squad jam, but they didn't win the second one. And then our main character has won the third one, but technically the team that we follow hasn't. So there's still that want going forward in future squad jams for the full lineup of this team to win together, of like Len plus Pito Hui. But that's going to be the interesting thing as we go forward, in that like as we get into the kind of final sequences, kind of Pito in real life wants revenge, so she wants to fight Len again, but they're on the same team together, and so, you know, what are they actually going to do? Because I would like to see the team get a full win together without any weird complexities that force Peter Hui and Len to fight against each other. But that mostly, I think, is about introducing kind of opponents who are of a kind of higher level that makes the team up required. Because the setup here seems to mostly be that this is a bit of an overpowered team to a certain degree. What are we going to do? Because even though there's like they usually do it in what squads of 6 you can have, just this team of 4 already feels like incredibly overpowered. But that is the situation there. There's some fun stuff at the end. We get the idea that Pito writes a new song. Karen really likes it. And then speaking to Eva basically on the phone, she talks about how she wants to get stronger. And there's a little bit of a like, huh? And I think this is, I guess, more people seeing the very competitive, wanting to do her best aspect of Karen that you don't necessarily think she has, but actually it's right there when she gets into the action in an intense way. So there still should be like, what, 4 or 5 episodes of the season left. We're only 8 in. I don't know how many episodes the season overall is. I'm assuming 12 or 13. So I don't think there's enough time for a full-on extra squad jam, but it looks like what they're doing is a sort of in-between invitational battle thing. I think they said something along the lines of like pairing up a lot of teams together to capture bases, but like Len wants to finally have her fight against the gymnastics club girls, I think is sort of the idea here. So we'll see what happens here. This could be nice as a bit of a different thing, a kind of base capturing style game that doesn't need to maybe have as much setup with the kind of battle royale system. So that could be a nice way to end the season, with the idea maybe the cliffhanger for a season 3 for the next squad jam, because I'm pretty sure, I don't know the later light novels super well, but I think we definitely go up to like at least 1 or 2 more squad jams, because there is quite a few volumes of the light novel for GGO out there, if I remember correctly. But yeah, they're my thoughts on the 2 episodes today. Really, really enjoyed them. I think it's just what this show is doing at its best, with the kind of Fortnite-y style action in the battle royale, but then the really cool sequences and almost like gimmicks of how each character kind of gets taken out with the environment. So super, super well done here, and I'm eager to see what they do going forward here in terms of how much of it is going to be action. Are they going to do a little bit more character development before we jump back into more action? But we'll see what happens there. So let me know your thoughts on these episodes in the comments below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.